Chapter 2. It was the worst of times. An offshoot of Hinduism had brought the Western nations of Europe together to form a spiritual force that rocked the world. Unlike Bhakti Yoga, this new holy empire held people under one God that they should all love unconditionally. A book containing the tales of a race of humans gifted with the power of this one God had created a stir in the multi-deity culture of Southern Europe. A man stood up to the oppression of that society and died as the most famous martyr in history. Jesus Christ was one man who changed the course of humanity's rise to greatness. His followers had recorded his teachings and adventures to attach to the holy book of the Jews and caused the first rift in the spiritual ascent of mankind. Aside from amending some of the Judeo customs, they forgot to write the most important facts of the story. In their haste to create the guidebook of love, they neglected to tell where the Christ had learned his knowledge of the infinite world. They forgot to put into this Bible of theirs that Jesus himself wandered into the birthplace of spirituality, a young man with an open mind, and walked out of India to penance himself by living and wandering through the cold climates in the mountains that separated his land from Mother India. When he had made it over the mountains, a move that Arthur Rimbaud would duplicate some time later, he returned to his homeland as the Savior. The miracles he performed were old news to the spiritual Indians that had practiced such preventions for centuries. India's eastern neighbor had stumbled across preventative medicines that came from the world around them. India's western neighbors discovered sciences to explain the world around them. India herself sat contented in the middle, waiting for the other civilizations to come to her for the secrets of the soul, the mechanics of the spirit. The unseen interaction between people was being misused throughout the world, and India held the only manual to this true essence of life. Jesus Christ ventured out and learned what he could. He returned to convey the message that he, like every living and unliving creature on earth, was the key component of God. He performed medical and spiritual healings and tried as hard as any man can to show this Western civilization the error of its ways. Alas, though, it appeared as though he failed, for when the society he lived in executed him for being too powerful a spiritual force, he was called the Son of God and related to the God of the Bible. We are all children of God, and the God of the Bible is just a fraction of the one true God that is embodied in, by, all. Yet, the society that killed the man for his beliefs eventually turned to the religion that sprouted from him. Christianity rose up like a pillar of salt from southern Europe and spread all over the continent. The first sign that a mistake had been made was overlooked. That civilization crumbled into ashes. Dark times arose. Feudal systems replaced governments, and peasants, who had no other hope, relied on the Christ's religion to get them through the day. Landowners needed the peasants needed the faith, and the church gained more power than any group of spiritualists should ever have. The result was a corrupted religion that sided with the royalty and rulers in keeping the masses ignorant. The gift of life on the spiritual plane had been misused by humans again for the purpose of individual satisfaction. Then the masses became restless. So the rulers committed the ultimate crime. Using their God's name, they attacked a land they claimed as their own. Those who could not be converted were killed. The church became more and more corrupt, gaining money and power by selling spiritual salvation to the highest bidder. Then something happened. For some reason that this writer cannot fathom, this mess of humanity was granted an enlightenment. Art, technology, and knowledge, mysteries of this world became clear to the people. They challenged the false ideals of the church, and most of them were silenced by death. The church, however, knowing that it could not hold back the wheels of progression forever, granted themselves forgiveness for making some mistakes, as if they knew the Protestant child they had spawned would undo them one day. They stepped back, but not down. The people of Europe began looking to trade with the rest of the world in hopes of finding a peace and wisdom that eluded them for centuries. And it was the spices and the spiritual elements within those spices that led them to return to the Mother India, but only for business. Bonded by a superficial God, superficial love, the people began to seek new adventure. Christopher Columbus managed to talk his way into an expedition across the Western Sea in hopes of finding a new route to India. Unsuccessful in reaching his goal, Chris stumbled across the American continents and, with the arrogance provided by the superficial love, claimed the land for first himself, second the church, and third his investors, the Kingdom of Spain, paying no regard to the human inhabitants that were already settled there. Now, an educated guess cannot really be made as to when those first humans arrived in the Americas, but we can believe that their civilizations were started and solidified around 1031 AD. That left them under 500 years to prepare for the slaughter and annihilation that the Europeans would bring to them. Life is not fair, and in this case, is not funny either. Around the 1560s in northern France, near the modern city of Lille, a child was born in the house of Jenner. Count Jenner was one of the few landowners who still held fast to the feudal system to provide for his family. He and his wife had lived in the small castle neighbored by the adjacent village. Although the countess had been impregnated twice before, this was the only child that hadn't jumped ship halfway through. On the night of the birth, 3 midwives stood around the bed as the sweating countess screamed from the pain. One of the wives had to help the servants in the hall drag the fainted count back to his chamber. The countess screamed on. She arched her back and dug her nails through the table. The midwife reached for the head and helped pull the child out. The countess clutched at the air above her, gritting her teeth and clenching her fists so tight that blood poured out of her palm. The other midwife covered her ears because she could not stand the screams any longer. Lightning crashed, and poor mother died. The child went on to live and was named Joachim Christian Jenner.